There we go. I am recording, Chair, and Mr. Jones is back in.
Right then, we've now concluded the exempt session of this meeting. We now go back to the main agenda. Firstly, can I make a statement? Just a comment from me as the chair of the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council Standards Committee, and I'm absolutely delighted. This is the first open meeting that's been recorded and has welcomed members of the public in, and that shows the transparency, the openness and the candour of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, and of course the Standards Committee, to ensure that everything we do is open to scrutiny by members of the public. So I just welcome what we're doing today. And on that basis, if we go back to main agenda item, it's number 3, which is minutes of our previous meeting that was held on the 3rd of March 2023. I'm just going to go through those minutes page by page. This is just for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Are we happy that that's a true and accurate record? Okay.
So, no, I'm just saying.
Oh, yes, we're happy. Yes, unanimous. It's happy. If we now go back, and I'll go this just for any items that have not been concluded or finished on that meeting that are not on the agenda today that need to be followed through. Agenda item 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Are we happy that all matters are included on the agenda today? Yes. Thank you. If we now go to agenda item, just scroll down, item 4, an update on the Constitution. Moderator Officer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And again, good thing we've got Simon here. I'm just trying to remember where we were when I last mentioned this to you. We had put to Council a proposed new constitution, and you'll recall that I'd circulated that to you, and you'd all had the opportunity to look at that. The Council wanted more training and information about the constitution before approving it, and so we have set up a working group which met for the first time today. We have 3, because we have 2 political groups, we had 3 members from each political group nominated to that working group. As it happens, we actually have 2 from each group there today. Simon has taken members through the first 2, 3. Oh, you got 3. Good. Oh, yeah. Before I have to leave. First 3 sections of the Constitution, and we are hoping to work through it in that way on a monthly basis. And get to a point where all of the elected members, so the working group, will be responsible for feeding back to other elected members, so that all of the elected members will have a full understanding of the Constitution and any changes that there are from the previous Constitution. But the benefit of it is that I don't think members ever used to be trained on the Constitution at all. So what this does is mean that what in the meeting this morning I was calling the ambassadors for the Constitution will now be elected members who really are familiar with it and how it works, and they will feed that back into their political groups with a view to us being able to approve the Constitution as soon as we can at Council. I'm not going to try and set a date to it because there are 24 sections. We got through 3 today, but some of them are big and will take a whole meeting on their own. So monthly meetings, and then we will hope to get to a point where it can be approved. And I will just update you at future meetings to say how we get with it.
Okay, Jack.
Officer, can I just ask, are lay members going to be shown or trained and into that same sort of thing, or are they not?
Yeah, we can. I mean, the difficulty with the Constitution is it's an enormous, complicated document. And when we thought we were going to get it approved by Council in February, we sent it to you, but I'm conscious we didn't really do any training. So I wouldn't want to get you into the training, the sort of complexity and detail that we're going to do with members. But what we can probably do, I think, is when we get to the end with members and we've got to a point where members are happy with it, what we'll do is perhaps have a session with you and take you through it and at least identify the significant areas and the bits that you probably need to know, particularly like rules of procedure, and you know about the code of conduct already, but there will be some bits of it that I think it would be helpful for you to be very clear about. So yeah, we'll organise some training and take you through that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any further questions? Can I just confirm, and I did ask this at the last meeting, about the Constitution, the way it is at the moment, does not affect the Standards Committee does its business at all, I'm right in saying?
No, so what happens is there is the old constitution, which is still running because the new constitution hasn't been approved. And then the new constitution, which will, we hope, at some point in the future be approved. But the provisions that apply to the Standards Committee are the same in both of them. It's just about where they're set out in the document, really. And the new one is designed so that it's much more accessible and easy to follow. But it won't make any difference to how the Standards Committee functions.
Thank you, that's clear.
Chair, the current constitution is 486 pages long.
I know it's a large
Right,
document.
so, you know, I don't think you want to read all of that, but we are also preparing a guide to it, which is about 25 pages long. So that may be the basis of training.
Can I just confirm though, if any colleagues here on the other stand want to read it,
Oh, yeah.
they're entitled to read it and can read it. But although I understand that the basic version is going to be user friendly, but it's there if any of us want to use it.
Yeah, it'll be on the intranet, so it's there. It's available for anybody to read now, and the new version will be available for anybody to read. But there will be a guide which.
Thank you. Are we happy to move on?
Yes.
Right, then if we now go back to the agenda item 5, it's the whistleblowing policy. And again, back to our Manfred now, sorry.
Yeah. So you do actually have a report on this one. Whistleblowing is one of the matters that you agreed at your first meeting, whenever that was, September. We would have as a recurring item on the agenda, because it's important as a Standards Committee that you know how we're doing in regard to whistleblowing. And this is always a bit of a difficult one, because if you have no whistleblowing referrals, that either means that the organisation is working well and that nobody has the sort of concerns that they need to bring as whistleblowing, or it means that nobody feels able to bring whistleblowing complaints, or they don't know the process well enough to bring whistleblowing complaints. So there's always a tension there. We haven't had any whistleblowing complaints in the period covered by the report, so effectively the last year. But in that time, we have revised the policy. We've sent out, the Chief Executive has sent out an email to all staff. So when councillors approved the new policy, probably I should start a little bit further back. There was going to be a revision of the policy, which would have been part of the new constitution. When the new constitution wasn't approved, we needed to update the whistleblowing policy. So that was put to council as a separate report, and that policy was adopted. It had been changed only insofar as it needed to have different legislation referenced, because the legislation had changed, and we needed to update the contact numbers for people. If they wanted to make a referral, they needed to know the correct numbers and email addresses so that they could do that. Once that was approved by council, the Chief Executive sent out an email to all staff to confirm to them that there was now an updated policy, and that email had a link embedded into it so that any staff member who wanted to access it could access it directly from the email. Subsequent to that, we've had, I'm not sure how to phrase this, an inquiry from Audit Wales. Just it was an inspection, there's no report produced from it, but they just wanted to check our whistleblowing procedures and make sure that they were correct. They made a suggestion that we reference in the whistleblowing procedures that it's part of staff induction, that people are made aware of them, and it's also part of our procurement process, so that anybody who is doing business with the council will know of our whistleblowing procedures in case they were to observe anything they needed to complain about. And Audit Wales suggested that we check to make sure that everybody had access, so that on induction and on procurement process, there was access to the policy. So what Simon has done, in fact, is to arrange for a link, again, a hyperlink, to be included in the tender process documents which go out and in the staff handbook and the induction. So those will happen. We have updated the policy. That's just a technical adjustment, so I could do that separately without having to go back to council. So we have done that, and from what I can see, we are now, Audit Wales seem to be content. All the staff have been made aware. So we are simply in a position where we have done everything we can to have a proper policy, and all of our staff and stakeholders being aware of that policy. So that's the position. There's no trends we can identify. There's nothing we can do to say, are there issues that you as a standards committee need to be concerned about, because nothing has been raised with me under that policy. And so that's the report. Subject to any questions, Chair.
Colleagues, questions for the monitoring officer?
No.
I just want to, it's just a question me. If someone should avail themselves of the whistleblowing policy and actually action it,
Yeah.
do we have support for that individual? And are we happy to go from welfare and well-being, etc.? So we have that process as well. Am I right?
Yes. The whistleblowing policy enshrines the principles of law which say that a whistleblower, if you count as a whistleblower, there's all sorts of legal and statutory protection around you. But also on the ground, there has to be practical protection
Absolutely
of you, particularly in an organisation which is as big, but realistically as small as this organisation, because it's very difficult. You know, one of the criterion is to have anonymity of a whistleblower. In an organisation of this size, when we've had whistleblowing reports, it's almost impossible for them to be anonymous, because once you start investigating, it's almost inevitable that people will know who that is. So we have to make sure that there's proper protection for anybody in those circumstances. And yes, we do have those systems in place.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you. Is there anything else from anyone on? Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
I was just, it's one of those challenging ones, isn't it? Because whilst the organisation isn't receiving any whistleblowing complaints, then that's in relation to complaints that are in the public interest. But we are seeing increasing complaints around councillor conduct, which is a different issue. And I don't know what the workforce complaints and grievances stuff, but I guess they're all separate things, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of councillor complaints, where there are complaints from members of the public, that's slightly a different thing. Where there are complaints by councillors against councillors, you can sometimes see that is a political trend.
Okay.
So that's slightly different. Where there are complaints by members of the public, yes, they go through a different route. They're dealt with differently, but there are procedures in place to ensure procedural fairness and protection to people who, you know, if a member of the public has to complain about an officer or about a politician, you can see how they might be anxious that would have repercussions for the way they receive services. So we have to make sure that our internal processes try to safeguard against that kind of thing.
And we're sorry, Chair, we're not seeing councillors using the whistleblowing policy to raise complaints about other councillors. They go into a complaints process.
That tends to be code of conduct stuff, but where there are complaints against councillors by councillors, they would normally, almost inevitably, they are code of conduct.
Okay, thank you.
Happy with that, Chair?
Yeah.
Colleagues, any other issue anybody wishes to raise? No? Thank you, Monitor Officer. If we can now go to number 6 on the agenda, it's the Standards National Forum.
And I think, Chair, that was just to update, because we advised members that you had gone to well, I came to part of it, but you had gone to the first meeting of that. I think we had just agreed we would keep it on the agenda on the basis that the next time you have a meeting, it's probably going to be something you would report back and anything that had come up.
Yeah, if I can just
Yeah.
contribute here as well. And I think yesterday was a good example because the National Standards Forum is about getting all the standards committees across Wales to talk about issues, to compare and contrast, and then to promulgate good practice. And issues, and like yesterday, for example, I know we'll talk on the training, but it was a brilliant example of what we're doing in South Wales, where we're utilising our resources, combining with a partner local authority and having joint training. Now, what's been happening in the past has been every local authority, presumably, if they've done training, they've done it with a silo mentality. Are we breaking those issues? Because what also that does, is there's that fertilization of ideas, and we're all starting to know what we all know, as opposed to just looking in a smaller perspective. And we become stronger for that. So I think it's a good forum, and I think it's a forum. Clive Wolfendale is up in North Wales. He's the chair of the forum. I do know Clive, so there's an opportunity to discuss them, and again to push the ideas that we are promulgating in Merthyr and the initiatives going on, but more so to get ideas back, so we become more business-like, the structure's right, and far more professional in the way we do our business. And as we've seen today, we've now got the public observing our meetings. We're able to communicate to the public on what this standards committee is actually doing for the benefit of all concerned in the Thistle County Borough Council. Yeah. So, any questions on the National Forum? As I say, I will continue. Jill, I didn't think you could make that one, could you? Or was it just for the chairs and the moderators?
It's just chairs initially.
But of course, if I can't make one of those, then our vice chair will join in my absence.
Yeah.
And I know Patsy will be there. Thank you. All right, then if we now move on, I know I touched upon it. Agenda item 7, training.
Yeah, just the opportunity to have a discussion about what you did yesterday and feedback and see how you all felt about that. And just perhaps before you do that, let's just say that we need to keep this on the agenda because that opportunity yesterday, we will hope that there will be more opportunities for training jointly with other local authorities, because I think that's helpful to sort of share that opportunity with other authorities, and that's something that's going to come through the National Standards Forum as well. I think they're looking at trying to arrange training through that. But yeah, Chair, over to you for how you.
I'll bring colleagues in, the colleagues that were there yesterday, but what, just for people who might be observing this meeting, the context was Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council Standards Committee and Rhondda Cynon Taf County Borough Council decided to hold a joint training event for members of the Standards Committee. That includes elected members and lay members. And the scenario would be that we would have a mock hearing with a paper feed involving a real life scenario, and then we would participate, raise issues, question, ask for information, etc., etc. And I, for one, thought it was very valuable and informative. But I'll now pass over to colleagues that were or perhaps couldn't be there for any contribution you wish to make.
Yeah, I'd just like to say it was I found it extremely useful as a new member of the Standards Committee last year. It certainly gave me an insight into, during the mock hearing, it gave me an insight into how the mock hearing was conducted, the issues that we need to look at, and things that we need to consider. So I thought it was, it's an excellent facility that we went to. It was an excellent forum that we had, and it was really worthwhile. So thank you to everybody that was involved in arranging that.
Okay, thank you.
See, you managed to find it. The first time I tried to go up there, I was lost. I thought it was going to be, I'd have to call it a search party to get me out.
I too found it really helpful and useful, the mock hearing and the script that we followed. Some people took that very seriously, and I preferred the people that kind of took the kind of ad hoc or ad lib kind of approach to it. It made it a bit more entertaining. I think for me it was really helpful in terms of setting out the process that we need to apply when understanding the facts of a complaint and sticking to the facts and, you know, keeping our kind of biases out of the room, which I thought was really helpful. And I thought, again, that has been mentioned today, you know, the kind of outcome in terms of you know, actions and sanctions being pretty clear. I think moving forward, Chair, for me, you know, being really, I think what came out yesterday was the kind of strict process of hearing. I think it would be helpful to see that process, just to reiterate the kind of the processes that we need to follow and to keep things very kind of objective in terms of the hearing process. I was interested also about, you know, we don't have an investigation officer. And I don't know whether I need to be worried about that, because I know clearly that, you know, the kind of assurance that you've provided around what that looks like for Merthyr, you know, is clearly acceptable. But I just wonder, you know, if you go through a process, and I think it reflects on the conversation we had earlier about timescales as well. If timescales are not clear, if investigatory officer role isn't clear, then is there a risk subsequently around appeals? You know, I wasn't advised of the timescale. It created me greater stress that was unnecessary. Who's the investigatory officer? What does that look like in policy terms? So it's raised a bit of questions for me around our ways of working. And is that a resource issue? Is this something that your team needs? And if so, what do we need to do to make that influence inside the authority to provide additional resource?
If I can answer that, what I would say, which wasn't covered yesterday, is in that hearing you had a chair and you had the five members, you had the investigating officer. There was no legal advisor in that scenario.
Okay.
Whereas here we'd have the legal advisor sitting with you to advise on the report. As I said, I would effectively be the report writer. So the report from me setting out pretty much what the investigated officer would do.
So it's about title. I'm getting hung up on title. Am I your role?
I know. But I think if we had to have an investigating officer, well, Caris is already compromised. I'm clerking it. We'd have to have a third solicitor. I'm not sure if it would be a reasonable.
We've only got a very small team, you know, in RCT we're you know, or equivalent sized authorities, you have so many lawyers, whereas we haven't. But actually the system, the process that you're trying to serve is served in exactly the same way. It's just we don't have those titles.
So you're confident it's reflective of the authority?
Yes, yeah, it is just, that's how it fits here. But the investigations that the Standards Committee has done previously, I've been really impressed with how thorough it's been, how the hearings have been handled, and then nobody has, as far as I'm aware, nobody has been dissatisfied with the outcome.
Okay.
So even members where there has been a finding that they have breached the code have said that they felt that they had a fair opportunity to put their case. And I think that's what you've got to get to. And those are the important things, that the complainant and the person complained about feel that they had a proper opportunity to express what they wanted to.
Something with that?
Yep. Thank you.
I haven't mentioned, sorry, Chair, I haven't mentioned this before, but at the conclusion of a standards hearing, the committee do a notice of determination, which sets out, this one's been redacted, as you can see, and this one has said there was a hearing, evidence was given and submissions, and it was found, number one, there'd been a breach of the members' code of conduct. Number two, no formal action was necessary, save that councillor undergo refresher training with regard to the social media policy in this case. But then there's reasons, right? So the reasons set out why you've come to that conclusion, and as long as they are they're tight, you shouldn't get any further appeal from there.
Yeah.
I found that the training yesterday was really helpful, and I think we are just making points of this investigating officer, legal advisor. I think they're the same thing. The one thing I found that was most important is the chair whoever that might be, has to be sufficiently robust and trained enough, with perhaps guidance, yeah, but to be able to conduct a very fair hearing. Because, as you say, monitoring officer, at the end of the day, it's about a fair hearing.
We've got that.
Yeah, and so, Declan, and I'll make a comment then.
Sorry, Chair. I just want to come in on this. It's not just the chair, to make it a fair hearing. That goes for all the members, and I think you mentioned this. Is you've got to go in there with a clear mind, not be judgmental. If you've got issues with that person, you've got to leave it aside. If you really like that person, you've got to leave that aside. You have to be straight down the middle, which I think you mentioned when you were chair before in other places, that can be quite difficult for someone when it's along party lines.
As I say, sometimes the chair's role is not a popular role by the members of the Standards Committee, because it's like being a headmaster. You've got to be very serious. You've got to be businesslike, and you've got to make sure everybody gets and it gets what they're there for. And if he sees anything, that they nipped in the bud. But I agree with you. I mean, all I can say, and it's for the record, I had a lot of experience in chairing disciplinary, so I understand the dynamics. And I'm sure any information experience that I've got, I will pass them on to newer members if they so wish. And if they don't so wish, they're going to get it anyway.
Sorry, can I just some one further point that Julian raised about the timelines and things. Does the Ombudsman put any timelines on those? No, not at all.
Because you have to be free to carry out the investigation that you need to carry out.
Regardless.
And if they were to fetter that in any way by saying, we expect you to have a decision by such and such a day, that could really lead to an unfair hearing. But what I always think is important for the person who is the subject of the complaint is that they know what the timeline is. Even if what you're saying is we won't be ready for 6 months.
As long as they're informed.
As long as they know. Because I think that's the worst thing, is not knowing how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing, and in this
Regular
case now,
updates and
it's,
everything
once
else, yeah.
you've made your, as you have earlier, made some decisions, then people can be advised about that. And they
I may make a suggestion, if I may, picking up on Julian's point about times and timescales. I think once something has started, a course of action has been taken, and I'm going to think whether an action log or there needs to be a record of, once the matter has been concluded and we look back, did we do it expeditiously?
Yeah. Was
it done properly? So we can learn from the experience. And that'll give us as a committee then. And I'm more than happy on your behalf. I know we meet not every month, but if there is one and we start one, that either myself or the vice chair is given a monthly update of how it's going. And if there are concerns, we will obviously raise it and question on your behalf. And I just think that there's a continuity then of us saying, we don't just wait for updates. We're questioning, and only not on the scope of the investigation, but on, is it being done expeditiously? Are there obstacles? So we can actually evidence the fact that we're following things up, so that both the complainant and witnesses and the person that's been claimed about understand those protocols and procedures that you referred to, and get assurance and reassurance that we're doing the right thing, but it's done right, not rushed. Yeah,
I got that information. We don't get many these hearings. How quickly or otherwise we dealt with these cases?
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for monitoring officer? No, thank you. If now move us on to agenda item 8, the recruitment process.
Yes, so members will recall that we had a member leave Standards Committee, which we reported at the last meeting. So I am really just asking for your consent to go out and commence the recruitment process. It would be the same recruitment process that we followed every time we've had to recruit over the last few years. And it would just involve advertising, and then there would be an interview process, which would involve you, Chair, potentially Julian as vice as well. And then however many we set up some interviews. We have a whole set of personal criteria that need to be fulfilled. We've got a job description and some set of questions that we always ask. So we've got a uniform process. So I'm just going to ask for your consent to go out and do that.
And it's for one vacancy.
one vacancy, yes. Yes, that's right. We are only one down, aren't we? Yes. Yeah, we just one down.
Sorry, Julian.
Can you just help me understand the difference between going out and recruiting, taking that approach, and co-opting?
I think you go out, you recruit somebody who volunteers, and you then co-opt them. So you
Because I was described as co-optee,
yeah, you are now a co-optee because you have been co-opted onto this committee.
right?
What we did was go out to recruit people
Yeah.
who wanted to be co-opted.
Okay.
All right, so you go out and you recruit people, but once the committee agrees that they are going to be part of the committee, you then become a co-opted to that committee.
Right.
It's not like conscription. I could go out and I can say you are required, like jury.
So we couldn't proactively identify someone who would add value to the committee.
No, I
No,
would rather.
You
Go on, sorry.
could say
Just a question.
you could say that person would be really, really great, and I would say tell that person to apply for that.
Okay.
Yeah, all I wouldn't want us to do, we might have our views, and I would suggest we can promote that there's a vacancy and there's a process, rather than get involved with an individual candidate, because I want us to stay scrupulously fair, scrupulously clean,
Yeah.
and not have any favourites.
Yeah.
Because as we've seen today, stuff that we're dealing with and we intend to deal with, you know, standards work is serious business, and we've got to have the right person. And I wouldn't want, by us speaking to individual candidates or people who aspire to this role, that they believe there's an undue influence coming their way. So I just want us to stay out of it, but be involved in it, if you know what I mean. That's at the tail end of the process.
Actively
And-
promoting the vacancy.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and I think it's so important, that we do this process ASAP,
Yeah.
so that the Constitution and being correct was spoken about earlier on. It's so important that we get those lay members there on the panel to make sure that this standards committee is ready to perform at any time. So I think you're looking for approval for us to
Yes,
say yes.
please, if everyone will say yes.
Again, are we all happy?
Happy, Chair, yeah.
Yes, it's unanimous. Go ahead, Moderator Officer, with the.
Thank you very much. Michelle and I will.
And
talk
be
about that
assured of my
next week.
contribution come the process.
Thank you.
Before we go on to date of next meeting, are there any issues that have been deemed urgent that anybody wishes to bring to the attention? I'm looking around.
No, nothing, Chair.
No.
No.
And all that's left to me is to say the date of the next meeting. And I don't know, Michelle, if you could remind us what date it is in September?
We haven't set one yet.
Can we make sure we sort our calendars out? It'll be early September. However, I just want to be assured if anything crops up and I need to call an emergency meeting because there's a welfare issue in it, that you're all happy to come in at short notice.
Chair.
Just to say, Chair, I will be away in first part of September.
No,
14th, 15th.
I'm just trying to think.
And I'm
what
I'm
the
only
last-
available up to the 7th of September.
And then
up
you're
to the
away for
sixth,
the
rest
end of
of
September.
September,
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay.
I think the best way around this is if we all get our heads into our diaries and we let Michelle know the dates that we're available. I take it early part of September.
Well,
Is that okay?
First of September would be ideal for me,
Would-
but
right,
I can't
that's
see it.
just-
Okay, I mean, we'll have to then, Chair, just decide based on the majority, what gets us the most number of people.
Yeah,
there,
absolutely.
because We may not have, everybody by the look of it. It's always difficult with September, you know. So.
unless we bring it forward to August, and that
August,
might
yeah.
tie it.
August is meant to be recess.
Right.
So certainly for your elected members, we do need some breaks in August. So we do try and preserve that as much as we can. So yeah, I mean, it would be September, or you could push it back into October. But I think we seem to have quite a lot of stuff on, and it may be better to keep it in September. So if everybody could reply to Michelle and just say which Fridays in September you're available, and we'll plump for whichever one gets us the most number of members.
Yeah, send out a little One of those little poles, you know. I can't think of it now, sorry.
Could I just conclude the meeting then? Colleagues, thank you for your input today, really valuable. Thank you very much for everything that you do for the work of standards in Merthyr Tydfil. And just, this is the very first, thanks to the public out there, and I thank you for your interest in the work of what we're doing in standards in Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Finished earlier than I thought. Thank you, Chair, even though we had to. And Simon nearly had to move